This is session 5, biweekly group. Okay. So actually there's one other thing I would love to address before we get started today, which is I was a little bit concerned to see that there weren't any submissions into the workshop folder for today. So I wasn't able to plan based on your submissions my lecture for the day, nor do I know what we actually have to look at. I want to know who has new work that they are ready to workshop for class today. I know that, Justin, you've been away from a while. Have you had the opportunity to put together a draft that we can all look at? Justin? Oh, okay. Is it okay if we look at it nevertheless today? Because next class is our last session, and that doesn't give us a lot of time to complete things, and it's sort of just what we got. Is that all right? Okay. So be it. That's how it goes. Does anyone else have something that we can look at today?
I believe there are 2 submissions in session 5.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't see them when I looked half an hour ago. Did I just miss them?
That's possible. I don't know.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Well, then I am definitely going to put together paper edits to send back to you guys by tomorrow. And then I guess we're going to spend a little bit of extra time to look at them, and I apologize for the trouble. Gosh, I looked at them about a half hour ago and it wasn't there. Maybe I'm just foolish. Okay. All right, so we'll look at those 3 things. Esther, do you have anything for us to look at today, or nothing new? That'd be okay. I mean, you did a great job last week.
If there's time, I have this really rough.
What was that?
Oh, if there's time, I have a just a short UC thing.
Okay. Then let's see how we're doing for time, but that sounds great. And we'll look at those 3 things. And yes, I'm so sorry, both Fifi and Samantha. I will. I'll turn around paper edits for you tomorrow. Okay. Then let's get started. I feel very relieved. That means that we have plenty to look at. Let's talk about the reading for this week. Let's talk about My Father and the Wine. Okay. Let's get started the way that we always get started. Let's talk about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what confuses you, and what would you stylistically consider stealing. Before we begin this discussion, there are a couple of reasons why I always include this piece, which are reasons why it works for me. As I've sort of talked about before, oftentimes my students in this class like to write about immigrant experiences. And I think that this piece does a wonderful job of showing that sort of conflicted nature of being a second-generation immigrant, where one's parents may have one experience and you have sort of a different one, and trying to resolve the differences and complications between the experiences of your parents and your own, how that resolution can be sort of difficult, and you sort of find an uneasy or complicated peace or compromise between them. I think that she does a wonderful job of eliciting and bringing out that that experience of being in the in-between. And I personally love reading stories of being in the in-between. I am drawn to stories of someone who's sort of outside one thing and another who's sort of on their own. So that's part of the reason I love this piece. I also love this piece because we're often talking about A story and B story, how there's a primary narrative that's saying one thing, telling one story, and then there's a B story, material that sort of gives the A story something to be in dialogue with, and then the two converge. And I think the way that she uses her own stories with her father and the wine, and then interacts with the Pellegrini Italian book about the making of wine, creates this sort of really wonderful back and forth that I stylistically would love to learn to steal. That ability to jump between one's own work and something you're bouncing up against. So those are the reasons why I assigned this piece. Those are reasons why I think it works. What are your experiences reading it? What did you think?
Personally, I found it kind of boring. I think
Huh.
it might have been the length because it's quite lengthy. And I was not engaged. I didn't find this that interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, that completely goes against what you were saying. But that's what I thought while I was reading it.
That's legitimate. I think this piece is on the longer side. I think it gets a little bit stuck in its middle. It does tell the full arc of their story together, but there's a version of this that is shorter and perhaps even more sharp. For the sake of what we talk about in this class, can you identify where you stopped being interested, or if you weren't ever interested at all?
Yeah, let me pull it up so I have a better idea.
This is why I always ask what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because I assign the things that I like, but oftentimes students will bump up against something and be like, that's less for me. And more important than liking all the things I assign, which I don't ask y'all to do, it's to figure out why things work for you or why they don't. Because it is definitely a concern to be engaged with respect to college essays, wanting to make sure that your reader continues to be engaged. Fifi, where did you get disengaged?
Around page 4.
What did it for you? Was it just sort of getting lost in backstory and exposition?
That, and I tend to do better when there's more paragraphs. And this is just blobs of text kind of, and that did not, I couldn't process that well.
Okay, that's fair. That's an important thing to take to heart. It's why when we're writing our essays, we try and keep our paragraphs short and keep the narrative pumping along. Are there other thoughts you'd like to share, or shall we talk about other things that work or don't work in this piece?
For me, when I was reading it, it seemed like there was some sort of tense ambiguity. Like, even though it was a recountance of the past, it felt like he recalled it so vividly that it seemed kind of present, which kind of mirrors the way how he was, or she was stuck between two worlds of being an immigrant, coming from a family of immigrants, and also being in this new area, Ontario, I guess. So
Yeah.
I thought it was cool how language mirrored her storytelling as well.
I think it does. I think this is in line with Fifi's criticism. I think that there's an ease of storytelling that sort of is deliberate and takes its time and sort of like has this conversational quality to it that prevents the action from coming quickly. It does leave her in this expositional place, but particularly this opening I'm really fond of. One reason I'm really fond of it is all of the time as writers, or as much of the time as writers as we can, we should be asking ourselves, who's our audience and how do we engage with them? And all things being equal, her audience is the hipsters and the people who know the hipsters, right? It's well-read folks who read nonfiction essays. So to tell this perspective at the beginning that's about the hipsters and their do-it-yourself attitude, and her taking them on like, you do this because you don't know what it's like to live with this. It sets us up for a very particular perspective and someone who is aligned with our way of seeing the world, but who comes with a lot of experience from another one. I think that you are right, Samantha, to point out the ways in which her storytelling brings us there and makes us feel like we're with her. I think that starts from the opening paragraph by very quickly pulling her audience into her eyes. Though it happens slowly. So Fifi, I disagree with you and completely honor your perspective. What else do people think? What else are your thoughts as you read this?
I think it's it sounds a lot like fiction, which is really good, but like there's like so many events. Like there's one where he tries to kill the raccoon, and another, and there's just so many. Like I feel like the main point, the main moral of the story starts to get obscured, but I think the storytelling is still really good.
That's a really good observation. I'm forgetting who said this. He is an important luminary of the screenwriting world, but who talks about how one conflict is twice as dramatic as two. I think that you may be right that this piece suffers from too many conflicts, too many episodes at the expense of following the through line of what the story is. Though I love each of the sections. Let's talk more explicitly about that. What is the through line of this piece? For you all, what do you think this is a story about?
I thought it was like about wine and how he like makes wine and how it's like a symbol of their culture and like their store, and like how that evolved through a couple of conflicts and events. But then like gradually I felt like it started like deviating from that. I don't know, that's just kind of my feeling.
Huh. Maybe that's why the piece has this quality of feeling meandery to you. When I read this piece, it's about the complex relationship between a father and daughter. The father who is very much of the old world, the daughter who is very much of the new world, and the ways in which that they diverge from one another until they're no longer in each other's lives. To read it with that in mind, I think the episodes make a little bit more sense in terms of where they all fit in. But with that being said, if that isn't the way that some of you read this, then perhaps the piece doesn't do what it is trying to do, or perhaps I am misreading and it is something else. Because readers are all very different and bring in very different perspectives. I would like to draw your attention to this ending. This ending I adore. This ending, I think, does something complicated and hard and does so pretty effortlessly. It juxtaposes her experience having that last wine her father gave her, her father who she's not speaking to, and it being undrinkable, juxtaposed against the Italian wine book talking about how wine brings the child closer to the father. I think that that juxtaposition is quite elegant and leads to this sort of cognitive dissonance. A different writer would have stopped here. That also would be a reasonably correct ending. What are your feelings about the fact that she stops with this last quote from the book as opposed to here? Do you like that choice? It's not a rhetorical question. Engaging with this end of the piece, this piece that the penultimate paragraph is talking about that last wine her dad gave her, her trying it, it having this bitter note and it being undrinkable, and then her describing what the wine is supposed to do and how it brings the family together. What does that do for you? Does it do the same thing for you that it does for me? Do you like that ending? Does it work?
Personally, I think if the author were to stop at "it was undrinkable," I think I would have liked the piece just a tad bit more, just because it kind of just has like a tiny little cliffhanger to it, or something that will make the reader think about it in a way. That little blurb isn't a bad addition. I just personally did not like it that much.
Any other thoughts?
Because, like you said, story A and a story B. Before the blurbs from Pellegrini's, it kind of agreed with what she was saying, but like just like her relationship with her dad, kind of somewhere along the way it started separating. Like she was talking about how their relationship got worse, but he was talking about how the children will help and everything, and then at the end it's showing how separate they are. I guess that's what it did for me.
Yeah. It does this interesting thing where the two, her writing and the book, now completely turn off in different directions from one another. I think there's one other moment where the blurb is ironic, where it's talking about the way that your family will love crushing the grapes or whatever, and she had such a terrible time doing it when she was younger. But for the most part, the book is in line with the thinking, and then at the end, it sort of leaves this tectonic feeling. Fifi, to respond to what you were saying, that you probably like it ending better at "it was undrinkable." I don't know which way I like it better. I would say myself that were I writing this piece, I would stop at "it was undrinkable." Because to me, that's the end of the story. That final paragraph, it does this work to elaborate how you should feel about the fact but to me, the story ends at "it was undrinkable." I think it's a totally justifiable ending to have that final paragraph. And I think it does something interesting to the piece that sort of moves it in another direction as a final note. And I've had I have one teacher from college who talked a lot about how at the end of the story, you take your foot off the gas and there's a final moment of a breath and then you get out. And I think that that's a reasonable way of thinking about how to end a story. But one of my favorite filmmakers, Billy Wilder, talks about, he has this rule that you get to the end of the story and you get out. And they're rivaling points of view. And I think that both are valid. The reason why I have this conversation and bring it up and try to in every class is I think ending here and ending here are both valid. And one of the things that we all have to figure out how to do as writers is to decide what our writing strategies are and what our way of thinking and our way of ending is, and committing whole hog to what our strategies are. So for you, Fifi, to say it should end there, that could be right. And if that's right for you, then that's the impulse to go with. Any other thoughts that people would like to share? I have a few other things I might care to note, but I want to hear from you all first. Any other thoughts? Any other experiences while reading this?
I still don't really get the final paragraph. Like, so the second to last paragraph is talking about how his father's wine is undrinkable.
First.
But then why does it talk about the child drawing close to the father?
It's ironic. I can sort of explain my way through it. Throughout the piece, Irina Dumitrescu makes reference to a book by a man named Pellegrini that's an Italian guide to like homemade, to making wine at home, to homemade wine drink making. And it sort of provides something for her work to bounce off of as she's making her way through. It provides commentary. And that ending is an excerpt from that book. And it shows the deviations between what presumably the father has in mind for making the wine and what has actually transpired in his family. It creates this sort of dystonic feeling of here are his hopes. Here are his hopes, but this is what happened. And to have those side by side sort of allows you to keep in mind both the dream of what could be and actuality at the same time, which gives this ending sort of this bittersweet feeling. It sort of turns off into an idea at the end, as opposed to landing in this final, what I think is a really bitter spot about how that last wine from the father is undrinkable. It turns the tone a little bit. Does that answer your question?
Also, basically saying he's using this quote to like contrast what could have happened with what did happen.
Yes, she's contrasting what has happened in her life with her father with what the ideal, according to this Italian book, would be about what the wine is supposed to do for the family. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's
but
unusual.
like it makes sense now, but like when I was reading it, it's kind of unclear what the purpose was the last paragraph was.
Okay. Well, then it would sound like you are in the same camp about thinking that that sort of experimental ending is less effective. And that's okay. Are there other thoughts, other things that people would like to share or say out loud about this piece that we can discuss? I have one other thing I would like to share. I want to draw attention to the way that the beginning is so confident in its perspective and tone. This person seems to know a whole lot about do it yourself, and she seems to have a really strong opinion about it. And she's taking a clear stand and perspective. That does a lot of work toward bringing us into her story. And I think that we could all learn quite a bit from Dumitrescu about that strategy, about how to get the writer thinking within your perspective by having sort of a witty and clever way of thinking of things, and something at stake, something she is bothered by that she needs to resolve. As always in this class, we talk about you want to introduce something at the beginning of the story that something at the beginning of your story that gives your audience some sort of hint of when the story will be over. And in the opening, it becomes pretty clear that this piece is about her growing up and how in her family they did a lot of do-it-yourself and how do-it-yourself was destroyed for her. And we know that the end of the story will come about when she decides that she will not do it for herself. And the story follows through on that in a stronger way than we necessarily realize at the beginning. It follows through on that in terms of she's no longer speaking to her father. But the beginning makes a gesture toward that revelation, that when we get that revelation, we know the story is over. Okay. I think that's enough on this piece. I'd love to turn over to our workshop pieces for this week. Is there anyone who would care to go first? I know that, Justin, you've been away. I sort of would perhaps like to take yours first, if that's okay. Is that comfortable with you? Okay. Can you upload it into the June Biweekly folder or tell me where it's at? While we're at it, how did you all feel about the writing this week? How did it go? How did it go, Fifi? How did it go? Samantha?
It was fine.
Okay. All right. Oh, it's in the session 2 workshop? Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. What's the stuff that's new? Is this the beginning? Is this what we've got right now?
Yeah, just those starting from there, yeah.
All right. I'm going to read this out loud. We'll do the stuff we usually do. Please, folks, take notes as we're going through so that we have plenty of things to talk to Justin about. Yeah, and then we'll get on with it. All right. I'll read this out loud. Take on your notes. What's working, what isn't working, what should Justin think about, etc. The map is often thought of as a static depiction of geography fixed to a sheet of paper. But in reality, our ability to design a symbolic illustration of our world extends the scope of maps to include not only mountains and lakes, but also the human story itself. Even so, we continue to construct new depictions of our world and play with existing ones, learning not only about our world and our past, but also more about our own place in it. Ever since I was in elementary school.
Sorry. Can you share the screen on?
Ooh, oh my God, I didn't do that. Thank you for saying so.
That would help a bit.
Yes. Sorry. That is my fault. Cool. Here we are. Shall I take that first paragraph again? Just so that we all have it in front of us?
That's fine. I just wanted to see it visually.
Thank you. Okay. Ever since I was in elementary school, the map's ability to visualize my geographical world always fascinated me. Whenever I had a few hours on my hand, I would love to go out on a hike or long run near my neighborhood. Topographic maps' contour lines enabled me to visualize my routes in 3 dimensions, encouraging me to explore new mountains, trails, or valleys on my runs and hikes. Such 3D interpretations encouraged me to discover what these new places looked like not in my head, but through my own eyes. And whenever I encountered such mountains, trails, or valleys the way in which I had visualized, I knew I had gone the right way and discovered something new. With this skill, I began to understand my place in the physical world. Soon enough, because of my love of exploration using topographic visualization, my friends regarded me as the go-to navigator on wilderness backpacking trips, while my mom named me a GPS. Okay. You're off to a lovely start here. I think there's a lot of really great things going on here. What I commend you for that's fantastic is a lot of getting to be a good essayist is having an expert perspective. And reading this piece, you sound like a map person. Like, who are we kidding? That's huge. Having an expert perspective and having a philosophy, a personal philosophy regarding the thing that you think about. So that's really great. We could enter workshop, but I want to ask you a direct question, Justin, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Did you get writer's block because you didn't know how to deal with structure?
I kind of got writer's block, but not necessarily with the structure, but more with how should I describe my kind of philosophies and what I learned. Like my structure I planned, I think I detailed it a little bit right after the last paragraph, was I'm going to describe like the different kinds of maps that I like and what they mean. And all connecting it back to like my place in the world and all that. And like the place where I kind of found hard is like, how should I communicate such values effectively?
Okay. Let's enter workshop for a second. I am going to write some thoughts down, and then I think I know what we should talk about. Let's enter workshop. What are thoughts that people have about where this piece is at and what Justin should be thinking about?
This is more of a suggestion for you. and if I were writing this, I might start with your last sentence, which is, my friends regard me as the go-to navigator on wilderness backpacking trips while my mom named me a GPS. I feel like that's not something most people have in common, where they can memorize a map. And maybe if you were to start with that, that might be a little more effective than just stating what a map does. That's just the way to start it. I think you would really have a better hook, like as an introduction. Those are just my thoughts.
I think, Fifi, that is well said. I agree with the spirit of that comment, though I have a different suggestion. I think what is currently missing in the way you've begun is bringing us into experiencing this essay through your eyes. One way to experience this essay through your eyes is to start in that way that Fifi just described, because that would be a way of entering us into your character. There are other ways to do so. That would be a reasonable one. The way I might suggest is by starting in a way that is more explicitly in direct address. I'll try and unpack that idea. A personal essay always reflects back on who you are. So for a piece about maps, it should in part be a map to your own mind, right? A map to the way that you think. So if you want to understand a map, the first thing you do is you have to look at the legend. You have to look at the key, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps that's the place to actually start this essay too. With this idea of, if you want to understand a map,
What do you mean by a map to the way you think?
so I'm trying to unpack that. Somehow it seems that your way of viewing the world is somehow inflected through understanding maps. So it would make sense to somehow at the beginning of the piece link up the idea of maps and this is the way I think. And I would actually take this sentence and invert it and try unpacking it in terms of your thinking. If you want to understand a map, you have to look at the legend. Or you have to look at the key. What is your way of thinking? Because an ideal version of this essay is a combination of both, here are my thoughts about maps, here are ways in which maps are complicated and interesting and cool, and here's what a map of my life would look like. right?
What do you mean by like a map of my life? Like, is it like a map of how I think or something?
It could be. Um, if I were to design a map of my life, um, there would be this really large pond in the middle that is full of movies and old rock and roll and my favorite personal essays written by David Sedaris. These things that I keep on jumping back into the pond to wade into, that I pull out to the other parts of my life. Off in the quarter, there's this mountainous region where there's all this seriousness. And I try to only visit there on occasion because it takes quite a climb. I don't know. I say those things because that's where my mind goes. What does the map to your life look like? What does the map to your life look like? I mean, actually, are there things that sort of brings out for you? Things that you can think about?
Yeah, I'm kind of. I want to think about this more like, how do I say it? Like maybe like a map of how like science, social science, or something connected, maybe
Sure.
rather than like kind of what you described, because that doesn't really, I guess, do well with my essay.
Yeah. I mean, you need to find the thing that works for you. What I'm trying to suggest is that there be this combination of here's my thinking about maps, and here's a way of thinking about me with respect to maps. And that will just take digging and thought on your own part, because only you can answer that. The other thing I would say is you should just spend some time just doing the word vomit draft where you get everything out on the page. I think you will find that once you do that, you'll have a lot more to work with, and some of your ideas will come into focus, because there's some things that just don't happen until you get the bad draft out. And often enough, the bad draft will have a lot of the good draft in it. Okay. So there are 2 assignments that I want to give you in terms of the writing of this piece. I think there are 2 big things that I want to get to see in this essay. And I hope in the next draft you spend some time on each of these issues. You spend a lot of time on A. A is what is a map? How should you think about maps? Why are maps cool? Right?
Yeah.
The other thing that we should get a lot of is, here is the map to my life. And before you ask, like, what exactly should that look like? I have no idea, because that's for you to figure out. That could be a metaphorical thing where you're talking about, here are these parts of my life, here are these other parts of my life. Or it could be a map to your way of thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that sound like something you can do?
Yeah.
Part of the reason I'm asking for this is that in order for this to be a personal essay and really land in a place where it feels like it's about your experiences, the answer to this question will give us that, however you interpret it. Do you see how that works?
Yeah.
But yeah, a version that oscillates between talking about this and talking about this will give you a common app. And I think a really good one. Are there other thoughts that people have, other suggestions for Justin, things that you think will help him get from point A to point B? Speaking of maps. Are there no other thoughts? Shall we move on? Justin, do you have any questions for the group or for me?
So maybe, like, for example, in the maps in my life, you say I could maybe make like a metaphor on like the way I think and my interests.
Yeah. Like, this is going to sound stupid, but it's this way of thinking that I think you should think about. What does your life look like topographically? What's up in the mountains? What's in the water? What can't you see on the map? What's where there be dragons? What's the highest point of elevation? What's the lowest point of elevation? Where is it hot all the time? Where is it frigidly cold? Where are the biggest population centers? Where is it completely desolate? Are there other parts of maps that are common parts of maps that I'm not thinking of that should be there? Add them. Yeah. What are the roads? What are the places where you're where the parts of your thinking connect or the parts of your life connect.
How the map changed over the years.
What was that, Esther?
Maybe like how the map changed over the years.
Yes. How has the map changed over the years? Where did there used to be certain countries, but over time those where did the USSR collapse? Or your equivalent? Are there countries that have been renamed? And again, no one can answer these questions for you because it's your life. But the version of this that I think will be most personal and vibrant will be one in which you've engaged with thinking about your life through the focal point of thinking about maps. That's the key. Any other thoughts, or shall we move on? Okay. I think we're going to move on here. To me, this conversation grows out of the conversation from last time where we were talking about the various word clouds, or just like the vernacular surrounding maps. Finding the ways of making your personal experience exist through that lens. Justin, do you know what to do before we meet on Thursday in order to make some revisions? I don't expect you necessarily to get all the way because it's not much time, but next class will be our last session, and I want to sort of help you get there because we haven't had you for the last two. Do you think you'll be able to?
Yeah, I'll do my best to do all your revisions.
Cool. Just take a stab at it. All right, then we're going to move on. Fifi, Samantha, who would care to go next? Somebody speak up. Who is that?
I'll go next.
Great, Samantha. Awesome. Great work, Justin. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, even though you didn't necessarily feel ready. It's just important to get the muscles working. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Cool. I have not had the opportunity to read this new draft because I just didn't. I guess the workshop folder, perhaps I goofed. So I'm going to read out loud right now, and we're going to do our usual thing. And I will look through and do some paper edits as well. But for now, let's take our notes, and then let's give Samantha a good workshop. I had rarely been away from my family, though my family often goes away. We travel a lot. Several summers ago, as we found ourselves stranded outside a shabby Italian B&B in the cobbled streets of Milan, I still felt comfortable because I was with my family. It did not matter that we were locked outside as the rain came falling by the bucket load. Despite the fact that we were thousands of miles from our house, we made our home locked outside the B&B, falling into our usual roles. My mom force-feeding my brother and me the chocolate nut bars she had smuggled on the airplane for these emergencies. My dad making the best of the situation as he lightheartedly joked about our predicament. My brother poking fun at the way my hair had plastered to my face in the downpour. Everything was strangely normal, despite the completely unfamiliar experience. I wish I could say the same about the summer between ninth and 10th grade. In this time, I attended a 2-week-long camp in Sichuan, China, with several other students from around the world. At this point, the only thing we had in common was our mutual reluctance to take part in this trip to China. It was my first time traveling far from home without my family, and the culture shock was brutal. Navigating through the airport without any adult supervision involved not only a checkpoint where we were stripped of our outer clothing and dignity as security roughly frisked us for contraband, but also a splintering heat combated only by a clamorous and feeble ceiling fan that seemed to only warm the building. One kid had lost his passport, of all things to lose, along the way, forcing us to miss our flight as he panically searched for this essential document. But luckily, after he recovered his passport, we finally boarded the plane and reached our destination after an 18-hour flight. I was fascinated and overwhelmed by the unique traditions of my parents' home country. There always seemed to be an abundance of frighteningly spicy vegetables saturated in red chili sauce and brightly lit food stands surrounded by customers aggressively haggling with street vendors over the charred meat skewers and gleaming sugar sculptures being sold in the crowded, bustling night market. On the subways, the sheer density of people would make anyone feel claustrophobic in the stifling heat and heaviness of human contact. As a U.S. citizen raised to speak and think in Chinese, I still felt alienated in a country completely foreign to me. I cursed the unctuous dishes of Szechuan, for the complete dietary difference did not sit well with me for the first couple of days. At home, my health-conscious parents always stocked the household with an abundance of fresh fruits. We even have a 3-tier fruit stand holding a variety of in-season goods ranging from fleshy persimmons in autumn to juicy watermelons in the summer. Meanwhile, the dearth of raw food in Szechuan taught me to be grateful to see even a shriveled tangerine after a meal. With every breath of humid air, I started to feel less out of place in a country several thousands of miles away from my family. I was beginning to become more adept at utilizing my subpar Chinese to guess what each sign signified and laugh when someone said something funny in the lilting and gentle Sichuan dialect. I found my taste buds tolerating the magnificently piquant flavors of dan dan noodles, mapo tofu, and other iconic dishes of Sichuan. Even though my family is where I feel the most comfortable, there is value in seeking the unknown. I learned that we may not always enjoy what we do, but we can always find value in these experiences. Wonderful. That's really far along. That's really great. That is yet another step in the right direction. Let's talk about what's working here. Let's talk about what isn't working here. Really great work. What are people's thoughts?
I really like the diction and how you kind of painted the scene, like wherever like you read, like I can just imagine what you see when you were there, so that was really nice.
I agree. What else is going on here?
I like how you could see a character development through the tone and how you were first scared or unwilling to travel, and then you pulled through and you liked it at the end. I thought you demonstrated that really well through the diction and through the imagery you used and the structure and the details.
I agree. There's a lot that's really working here. What else do people think? I have a couple of thoughts I'd like to share, but I want to leave workshop open to everyone for a sec before I jump in.
I also really love your descriptions, but when you're describing like how your feelings about China evolved, I got a little confused because in at first the paragraph we were talking about the everything that's like more negative about China, and then it gets good because you're fascinated, I guess, or maybe that's just what I feel. And then then it's bad again because you're comparing it to your home, and then it's good again. I don't know. I feel like it could have the progression could be more gradual. But that's just me. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you because when I was writing it, it felt kind of choppy and jumpy when I was describing the experiences, especially when I think it's between the paragraphs where I talked about the dearth of raw food and then gradually beginning to feel less out of place. I think in that region it was very abrupt. So I was wondering if you guys thought that I might need something more in between these two paragraphs, or does it seem okay?
Yeah. Okay, then I will launch into what my thoughts are because they are directly related to that. There's stories like this that are about travel. One's got to think The Hobbit, there and back again, right? You went somewhere and you came back and somehow you were changed, right?
Yeah.
So what I think we are missing here are two things. We are missing back again in some respect. Back again could mean back home with your family. Back again could mean back in the airport. But we want to see a scene where we see you landing on the other side of these experiences and have been changed somehow. Can you name what that change is? This is not a rhetorical question. This is for real. What do you feel like is the biggest change that you went through between when you left and when you returned?
In actuality, I think the biggest change was I could actually tolerate spicy food, but I feel like that's kind of I think that's kind of an arbitrary point to bring up in this sort of thing.
Okay.
Maybe I think I've definitely felt more comfortable being alone at that point, and I felt like it was easier to get by with just without really leaning upon my family members for that sort of comfort or support. It's easier to be more independent, I guess.
Please write that down at the bottom of your page, what you just said.
Okay.
All of that. Tell us when you are good and we can continue.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay. The other thing I'd say about that is actually include even that thing that you just said about spice, because that could be a nice way of pulling some of the air out, because oftentimes the trouble with trying to like talk about lesson is that you get lost in like, here's the big thing I learned. And some of the way of lessening the impact of it feeling like heavy is by lightening it with like the small thing. There's a way in which you can write that paragraph with, I came back and I could handle spice, but also I was independent. That turn could help you make that move. And as always, think about specificity. If you can talk about it in terms of, my parents would serve dishes and I'd put chili flakes on them, but that wasn't all. Right?
Yeah.
Think specificity. I am really fond of the way in which this opens now. I think that the first page is working really well. And I think that the problem construction is a lot clearer. I think that you should look at these two paragraphs, these two sentences, because you can find a cleaner way of saying this that's a little bit more direct. That's one that I I would point to specifically. I think across the board, there are moments that you are using more words than you need to in order to say the things you're trying to say, where you can have shorter examples fill in for what you're saying, where you can strip away to the one detail that does the full work. I say this because I see that you are at 638 words and the essay will be 650. And in order to be able to write conclusion, you're going to have to find that word count somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, I would not lose anything if you said, falling into our usual goals, my mom force-feeding my brother and I the chocolate nut bars, my dad cracking wise at our predicament, my brother laughing at the way my hair plastered to my face in the rain or in the downpour. There are ways that you can just cut a couple words here and there where you are just including what the action was. I also would point to this paragraph. There are a lot of places where you can just cut half of the sentence and still get the idea across. I'm also still okay, we're good over there. I want to go back to the thing that Esther pointed out because I think she's right. We should get some sense of how this evolution came about. How did your increasing comfort come about?
I think it just comes out of being thrown in, just immersed completely into the culture. It's just, I don't really know if there's a specific watershed moment that led me to become more comfortable, but it was definitely the complete exposure that just sort of had to adapt to others. There's no other there's no other option I had, I guess.
Would you write that down as well? I don't think there was one watershed moment that led to me becoming comfortable. I just sort of had to adapt. There was no other choice. Sometimes when we're like sort of struggling with what's the thing that I say that shows that the evolution happened, sometimes the answer is just saying it in the negative, saying it in like, I don't know what was the thing that happened, but I woke up one day and my Chinese had improved and I was eating this spicy food and I went, it happened. Right?
Yeah.
In the absence of knowing how to name the thing, you can name the absence of the thing, and your reader will probably take it for the existence of that transition.
That actually reminds me of this piece I read in my class before. It's David Sedaris's "Me Talk Pretty One Day."
I love Sedaris. Yeah.
Like, I learned French through being exposed to these abusive horrors of my teacher. So I guess that works that way, how it's just how you are completely just subjected to this sort of almost abuse or trauma to the point of where you have to adapt, and you realize one day that you have adapted. You just never stopped to think of how it happened. It just did.
Yeah. That's a good way. That's a good solution. So yeah, the two things that I was missing as I was reading this was how that evolution transpired, and what we just talked about is fine. If it's, I don't know, but it did, that's okay. And then the ending that gives us some sense of this is what I came back with. And some of that can be goofy and surface level, and I started putting chili sauce on everything. And part of it should be this idea of this independence and what that independence means to you. And then some reference then to the top may help you give a very punchy ending. How often have you gone away from your family alone since? Or what are your anticipations of what it will be like to leave for college on your own?
Are you asking that rhetorically or as a question for me to answer?
I guess I'm asking it rhetorically right now, but when you're sitting down to write, that could give you a place to end.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's true. From the moment that you submit this essay, a year from now, this time, I'll be going away from my family. But what?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can come up with a good answer to that, it's a punchy ending and you can get out.
Yeah.
Were you raised to speak and think in Chinese?
Yeah, actually, Chinese was my first language. So when I went into preschool, I didn't know how to speak English, which was the problem. So in a sense, I was raised to speak and think in Chinese, but that eventually transitioned into English.
Okay. And then you talk down here about subpar Chinese. Is that because, like all of us, you spent enough years away from the language that it dissipated?
Definitely, yeah.
Sure.
It's a bit strong to say that I was raised to speak and think in Chinese. Maybe I could be a bit more mild.
Would you repeat that one more time?
I think that might lead to some clashing because it's implied that I was raised to speak and think in Chinese, which leads readers to assume that I wouldn't have this subpar Chinese. So I think maybe I could find a way to make the phrase that I was raised to speak and think in Chinese a bit more mild in order to prevent that sort of contradiction.
That's why I pointed that out. I thought that those two things felt contradictory to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one way that you could deal with that is by bypassing that thought entirely and going straight to the food in Szechuan made me feel alienated and in a country completely foreign to me. My health conscious parents, etc., speaking about the ways in which this is the thing we were talking about a week or two ago, right? About how there are certain expectations your reader may have about what your experiences are because you're Chinese. And you get to re-educate them and go, no, my parents are health conscious eaters first before they are Chinese eaters.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's immigrant experience. There are ways in which we line up with stereotypical expectations, and there are ways in which we really don't.
Yeah.
What are other people's thoughts? What else do folks think is going on here that Samantha should perhaps think about for her next draft? If there aren't other thoughts, I think we can get pretty close to wrapping this thing up. Samantha, do you have questions for us?
I think they've been mostly answered already, so that's good.
Okay. Don't worry about this until you're through the next draft that completely fleshes out the idea of how the transition happened and back again, what it means to be back again, what it meant to be back with your family, or what it will mean to leave them again when you leave for college. When you get through that full draft, I want you to take stock and look at where you are and start figuring out how you make cuts within. And one of the ways that you do that is by thinking really hard and brutally about what the most important plot points in the story are and how you jump from one to the next. Are you applying to the UCs? You said yes, right?
Yeah.
A challenge that I want you to try and do for next session for Thursday, if you can, is I want you to try and write this extra material and have a longer version of this essay, and then work out a version of this essay that's only 350 words long.
You want me to, hold on, I'm confused. So you want me to take this essay and write a shorter version of it?
I want you to do two things. I want you to write all of the material that would make this complete in the long version with the stuff that we just talked about, talking about the transition and back again. Complete that document, and then work on a new essay that is on this topic where you take what you have and write the greatest hits version, the version that is only 350 words long.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
I imagine you will you'll want to use this for the UCs, I imagine. And oftentimes my students find that when they go through the act of those impossible cuts, of cutting it down to 350, they have a better idea of how to do the version that's in the middle.
Okay.
Because if you got the 350 version and you got the 800 version, you know how to do 600.
Yeah.
Does that seem like something that you think you can do for Thursday?
Yeah.
Cool. This is really excellent work. This is a long ways down the way, and it speaks a lot to your character. It's a lot of fun. It's really well written. You have a really great command of language. The next step is to land an ending that gives us a sense of how you got your independence. It's awesome.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Let's move on. Let's talk about Fifi, or rather, let's talk about her work. Again, I'm going to read this out loud. Same reasons as usual. Cool. All right. My nature name is Morningstar, Venus, the brightest planet which appears in the east before sunrise. I volunteered as a cabin leader in Walden West Outdoor School, where fifth graders come to explore environmental science through hands-on activities as part of public school curriculum. Everyone must choose a nature name in WWOS, and I chose Morningstar because it symbolizes hope and guidance. I didn't speak English until I came from China to attend preschool in the USA. For that reason, my teacher warned my parents that my English reading comprehension was below California state standards and suggested me to repeat second grade. My parents refused, but eventually transferred me to a new school where I met my fifth grade teacher, Miss Edgemon, who encouraged me to read a lot of books and teach my classmates my math tricks. She proudly introduced me to the principal, who later remembered me out of more than 600 students. Miss Edgemont inspired me to be a better student, and I wish... Whoa, what just happened? I am very confused. Cool, we're back. To be a better student, and I wish to give others the help that I was so lucky to receive when I needed it. I was 13 years old when I first volunteered in WWOS. Although I was a child myself, I feel like a mother caring for 18 fifth grade girls in my cabin. As it was most kids' first time away from their family, I was responsible for the safety and well-being of my girls. In the early morning, I helped braid girls' hair into fancy hairdos. During the day, I was the classroom TA and checked their homework. At night, I read girls' bedtime stories to help them sleep. I read different stories, like The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, Just a Dream, Wump World, and Jumping Mouse. One time, I supervised girls from a less privileged school. Some of them hardly spoke English, let alone fluently. I talked to them using my broken Spanish and encouraged them to feel important and extraordinary the way most kids do not. They reminded me of my second grade. One of the riveting activities at Walden West is a 2-hour night walk. Walden West is located in the mountains. Students must walk along a trail leading into the wilds in the light of the moon without flashlights. My last night walk was on a moonless, raining night. Students in their raincoats and ponchos staggered in the darkness. I walked at the end of the group to ensure no one was left behind. I kept reminding my girls to watch their steps as it got darker and darker. I barely saw my hand in front of my face. Sea Turtle gradually clung to my body while she was walking. I bent down. "Are you okay?" She didn't reply, but clung closer to me. "Give me your hand." I reached out to hold her little cold hot hand in my palm. "We'll be all right." As the rain continued pouring down, everyone's shoes were muddy and soaked, and the trail became dangerous and slippery. All of a sudden, Sea Turtle skidded and twisted her ankle, crying. I had to carry her on my back to the nurse's office for treatment. My girls loved me and always made me a proud cabin leader. Even though I only spent 5 days with each group, I felt emotionally bonded with them. They all cried the night before camp ended when they thought about leaving the next day, and I knew their sadness at leaving was partly because I had made them feel so welcome. This year, their school teachers invited me to their graduation picnic. I was 30 minutes late to the picnic due to my final test at my school, and Pebble started crying because she thought she would never see me again. She cried again when I was about to leave at the end of picnic. Through volunteering at WWS for the past 3 years, I've grown into a more mature and responsible person. This experience has made me strive to be a better individual. I want to be a morning star so that these fifth graders can look up to me for guidance as a role model. Lovely. Wonderful. All right. This too, leaps and bounds. Looking really, really good here. Let's talk about what's working. Let's talk about what isn't working. What should Fifi be thinking about? Let's open up the floor. What are people's thoughts? I think that you are off to a nice start with having there be this feeling of like there's the A story and there's the B story and they come together. I think there's still some work to be done until they feel totally coordinated together. One thing that I would recommend that I actually meant to say to Samantha before, I try to say this to all students. Before you turn in your next draft, read your work out loud. It's the best way to catch grammar errors and things like that. And I caught a few as we were going through. I worry about that less because there's plenty of time for that. It's later level draft concerns, but it's also a good way of catching when syntax is a little odd, and there's some of that as well. If you can read it out loud cleanly, then it's where it should be in terms of its meter and style. But let's talk about actual content for a second. What's working here? What do people really like?
I really like how you went through this kind of story development and explained how, like, your name symbolizes something and how you develop that symbolism through the story and the impact it has made through the community.
Yeah, it's really good. What else is going on here that really works? Um, I want to talk a little bit about idea flow. I have one thing about this, which is straightforward and easily fixed. I'd like to suggest, Fifi, every time you talk about Walden West, please just call it Walden West as opposed to WWOS. It's a little cleaner. And we want the reader to identify Walden West as a character. And typically, acronyms we don't, and like names of things we do. I want to talk about this opening paragraph. I'm not sure it's in the right order because the cards flip a little out. I get confused between sentence 1 and sentence 2. My nature name is Morning Star, before sunrise. I volunteered as a cabin leader in Walden West. Those two actually don't connect as ideas.
Okay.
What are the cards you're flipping in order?
Would it make more sense if I said where the nature name was from in the beginning, in the first sentence? If I say something like, at Walden West, people choose nature name, and mine is Morning Star Venus, the brightest planet, yada, yada, yada. Would that make more sense?
Yes, but then you have a lot of ideas that you're unpacking at once, and you want to turn each card over as if it's effortless.
Oh, boy.
Right, right?
Yeah.
So what happens if you do this? I actually shouldn't do this. I'm going to move a copy of this paragraph down, and I want to move a couple of things around. I'm going to make a suggestion. Don't feel like you have to use it. Part of what we're doing here is we're thinking about idea flow. How do you introduce things in the order that you want your audience to experience them? So the first thing that our audience has to know is that your nature name is Morningstar, because that's the opening, right? What's the second thing they need to know?
Why the nature name is important?
Okay, why the nature name is important. You have this all here. My nature name is Morningstar. I chose Morningstar.
Or maybe more like, that part where people need to choose the nature name at Walden West.
I chose Morningstar as my nature name at because it symbolizes
or can we say something along the lines of, I based my name off Venus, which is the for this planet that appears in the east before sunrise, as it also symbolizes hope and guidance? Or is that too many ideas in one?
It's probably too many ideas in one.
Okay.
This is probably an important idea as well. This could still stay as part of this we want to lead with action. So, can we try and get this now to a place where it actually makes sense and is clean? I want you to now drive.
Okay.
What is the way that feels cleanest in spoken out loud, in which you're turning over one card at once? Is this the order that we should be introduced to all these things?
I'm going to say no.
Then what should be?
I want to say, I want to answer the question, why do I have a nature name? And the answer would be at Walden West, for Walden West. So maybe, yeah, if we have something between the first and second sentence where we say the purpose, I needed the nature name when I volunteered at Walden West, or something like that.
So my nature name is Morningstar is definitely a good way to start.
Okay. Is the idea the next idea I chose my nature name when? Don't we need a background as to Walden West?
Yes, but one character at a time.
Or is that not as important? I'm trying to think which one, like which card should be turned over first.
Yeah.
And I thought having the background is a better way to start it.
So it doesn't make sense to introduce that you volunteered as a cabin leader at Walden West before we know that Morningstar is related to Walden West. And that's part of why we're playing this game, right?
Okay.
My nature name is Morningstar. What's the next thing we need to know? In terms of idea flow. What's the next card you want to turn over?
The connection of the nature name. And
the connection of the nature name being from Walden West, or about why that's the name?
I want to say Walden West. At least in my head, that makes more sense.
So then would it be, my nature name is Morningstar. I chose, or you chose your name, or you earned your name, or what?
I chose it.
I chose my name. Finish out that sentence with the details that should come next. They're all down here, but you have to decide which they are.
Oh. boy.
Mm. I'm gonna help with this and make a suggestion, and if I'm wrong, fix it.
Okay.
Um,
It's not a summer camp.
then what would you call it?
It's a
Is it a summer
Right.
learning experience?
it's not during the summer. You cabin leaders have to skip a week of school of some sort.
What would you
to-
name it then? I mean,
'cause
other than an outdoor school.
Yeah, it's during January, February, March, April, and stuff like that. So maybe just a place.
You can do better than place, but we can use that as a placeholder for now. My nature name is Morningstar. I chose my name the first year I volunteered as a cabin leader at Walden West Outdoor School. Um, um, is it experiential learning? What do they talk about it as?
Just how to take care of the environment better. Different aspects of nature, the ecosystem.
And is it specifically fifth graders?
Yes.
All right. My nature name is Morningstar. I chose my name the first year I volunteered as a cabin leader at Walden West Outdoor School, where fifth graders come to explore environmental science through hands-on activities as part of the public school curriculum. I think that's reasonably stronger. I would look at place, and then you can turn over the last. You can turn over the last cards. Um, those two ideas can come in this next sentence.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure. I feel like what I just have to do is try a bunch of things, try a bunch of just rearrange it a bunch and see what flows the best and what sounds like the neatest.
Okay. Then
And
we're going to
I don't
stop
think
with this now. But do you see sort of what this game is at?
Yeah. I get
think,
it. I don't think I can nail it just on the first try.
Great. Then we're done talking about this particular thing right now because we don't need to. It's your work to figure out. But I thought that this was a nice example situation because idea flow can be kind of hard. And it's amazing how just rearranging things can get the brain to process in the right order. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know how to do this and move forward, we can let that be.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make a note to yourself that every instance of when you say WWOS, you say Walden West?
Yeah. One thing I have a question about is how do I incorporate the second paragraph in this essay without making it sound so choppy? It kind of seems like a bag of poop that just got delivered on my front door. It you can see the relevance as we go on in the story, but at the beginning it just sounds whack, and
Okay.
it sounds like it doesn't belong.
Okay. I actually feel that way about this paragraph when you're talking about the girls from a less privileged school.
Okay.
This one, to me, actually jumps away from what you're trying to do.
Sure.
So I would actually highlight that as the one that breaks the flow. As far as I'm concerned, starting the second paragraph in a way that jumps into a different thing is okay so long as it seems intentional. So perhaps what you're missing here is a topic sentence. To me, all you would need to do here, I'm actually not bothered by the jump between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, but if you're concerned about it, just add in the line, I came from a different world.
Can you explain and expand that, because that seems like an even bigger bag of poop right now.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes. If this opening paragraph is about where you have gotten to be in the present day, we expect you to go back in time and talk about where you're coming up from. If the last line of the previous sentence is talking about space imagery, you can get away with something that is a reference to space, like I came from a different planet, right? You can
Sure.
use the vernacular level transition to help you transition. And if you are using the language of the world that I came from was very different. When I was young, I didn't speak English at all. We get that you are sort of leading us down a storytelling path.
So now just work with me here. If I were to, for example, end my introductory paragraph by saying, well, what's here? I chose Morningstar because it symbolizes hope and guidance. And then my next paragraph refers to that hope and guidance by, as in, I had a mentor or a teacher that was that Morningstar for me. If I were to go something along those lines, would that be a smooth transition, or would it still sound weird?
There is a way of doing that would work. I would need to see it. I think that to do that too literally could come off cliche. To do that subtly would absolutely work, and we just have to see, case by case basis. But yeah, that's a really good idea. That could do it.
Okay. And I think another question relating to the second paragraph is, I don't really refer back to it throughout the essay, and that's something I know I should do to show its relevance. So how would you suggest me doing that? Because I have one of my thoughts was to kind of break the second paragraph down and explain it in small chunks throughout the essay, but that seems even worse than what it is currently.
I agree that this is exposition that has to happen at the beginning.
Okay.
Maybe the way of figuring out how it functions is figuring out what is the essential information you need to convey to us within this paragraph. What is it? What do we need to get the sense of within that second paragraph?
That I almost failed second grade, and my fifth grade teacher helped me get through that.
Cool. So I had a mentor. I was really struggling in this way and almost failed. I saw just how important an important teacher can be to someone, basically.
Okay.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then this sort of helps us with that as well. He inspired me to be a better student, and I wish to give others the help that I was so lucky to receive when I needed it. I think that's really sharp. I think this does not help you.
Okay, yeah.
I think one of the things to think about in your next draft is what are all of the explicit important steps in the story, and boil down to just what those moments are. The same way that I suggested to Samantha that there be the 800-word version and the 350-word version, I suggest, Fifi, that you actually do the same. We're going to get to more of that later, but I suggest you actually think about that a little bit, because that may help you to figuring out what those.
Sorry. I kind of already have my 350 version. I think I should. Sorry?
Of this?
Yeah, I think
Great.
I shared it to you in the PC folder as like a UC essay.
Cool. Then I can take another look at that and I can see what I think.
Okay.
One of the things I think that needs to happen is to convey how this story about the night walk is about how you are a leader to them.
Okay.
I think that you do that, but somewhere we get lost in the details and it feels less explicitly about that because we ring the same note a couple times.
Okay.
It may just help to land that a little bit more explicitly in the topic sentence or in the closing sentence about I am their morning star.
Okay.
The other thing I think you are missing is an ending that is really conclusive.
Yeah. How would I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. How would I expand on that? I don't want it to come off too cliche, and I feel like if I were to continue, it would get there.
Specificity is the enemy of cliche.
Okay.
And the language you're currently using is the broad abstract of what it means to be a leader. And I think what may help you is if you're writing explicitly about what it means to be a morning star.
Okay.
And if it is some combination of a morning star burns at 3,000 degrees Celsius. I just made that up. Please look it up and figure out what it actually is. A morning star burns at 3,000 degrees Celsius, and is always available to lend an ear to the girls in her cabin.
Mm-hmm.
A morning star is only 2 planets away from the sun and knows how to help a girl when she's scared.
Yeah.
A morning star is the brightest star you see in the night, and juxtaposing the two, finding those things. Does that seem like something that you could do? Does that seem like something that may help you stay away from cliche?
Yes.
It's by getting nerdy about science while also getting into that touchy-feely place. I think that would prevent it from landing in strict cliche.
Okay.
And anyone who's a smart reader will be able to intuit that being a morning star means being a leader.
Yeah.
But better than that, morning star means you as opposed to leader in the abstract.
Okay.
Does that give you something to work with?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. I think you will find that doing that will bring you above your word count, so you'll need to do some cutting.
Yeah, there's a lot of places where I can cut a bunch of words out, sentences as well.
Yeah. The things that I would look for in particular, as Mr. Screenwriter sitting over here, is moments where you're repeating a beat, where an event happens more than once. Find the events that tell the story and cut out everything in between that feels like a reiteration.
Okay.
Like, we don't need to see them unless it's a bit, we don't need to see them crying so many times.
Yeah.
Unless it's the bit of there's a lot of crying when we leave Walden West. Or when we leave each other. Otherwise, it doesn't need to happen so many times.
Okay.
I also think you can tell the story of going on the walk faster with fewer details and still get across what you need.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions for all of us?
No, I think I got everything answered.
Do you feel comfortable with this? Do you think you know what you need to do between this iteration and the next?
Yes, I do.
Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So what I'd love to see for next time is this essay expanded out with all those things discussed, talking about what it means to be a morning star by the end, and then the cut down version that works at 350. And I would ask that even if you did the one that's in the folder, I'm going to take a look at it tonight, but also revise for that, considering the changes that you make now.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. It is currently 9 p.m. We have a half hour left. Esther, you said that you had something you wanted us to look at? Esther? Oh, right. I think Esther said that she had to leave at 9 p.m. tonight. Okay. Then I actually have to run to pee. Please excuse me. When I get back, it seems that we've done a lot of talking on all of this. So I want to jump into talking a little bit about supplementals. Is that okay? Does that seem like a reasonable use of our time?
Yep.
No, it's actually not ready yet. Oh, okay. All right. I will be right back, and we will resume. Let's take a 5, everyone, and yeah, then we'll resume. Do we have everyone here? Or would we be good to resume?
Estoy aquí.
Pardon?
I'm guessing you don't speak Spanish. I take that back now.
Oh,
I'm
did you
here.
say C? Oh,
Yeah.
the sound cut out for a moment. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was like, something about. Cool. I want to resume with a conversation that we were having last session because it becomes a lot of the conversation as you get to the later part of this process. Justin, I know that you weren't with us, and that's part of why we're picking it back up. And I'm going to particularly single you out as we work on this right now so that you get some specific time on this. The most important thing to do when you're working on school-specific supplements is to be very clear about what you're looking for and how you can find it at that given school. Because as much as a lot of the process is about showing what you have to offer, one of the things you're also trying to demonstrate is why you're a good fit for them. Because at the end of the day, they want you to come there and they want you to be really excited about their given school and what they have to offer. And I often warn against what I call Mad Lib supplementals, wherein you hear something to the effect of, because it's really pretty there and the academics are really great, I'd really love to go to blank. And if you can fill in that blank with any place, then it doesn't really work for any place, because every school has a character of its own and qualities of its own and different things really to offer, even between these schools that we all consider to be of a certain caliber. They still have very different personalities and benefits and drawbacks. So with that being said, I want us to return to this question. What are you looking for in a school, and why are those things important to you? I saw that someone still has their list up from last time. If you'd open on that up, whoever's that is, that would be lovely. But I want to spend this moment again and sort of deconstruct this. Can all of you reopen and take what are a couple word answers, if you already have couple word answers, and make them full statements? And Justin, I'll turn to you for a moment now. Do you know what you're actually looking for in a school? Do you know what you really, really want to have there? And no answer is too silly, because it's about what you want.
Not very specifically yet, but in general, I want a very strong natural sciences and earth department, and as well as like a vibrant campus community with a ton of clubs and activities that I could try out. So just kind of that stuff in general. To look into more things.
What is your focus in the natural sciences? What do you study?
Like environmental science is really good, but like I don't want to limit myself to like a specific field. Like environmental science is pretty good. I really like that. Earth science is also really, I find earth science interesting, and yeah, just that kind of area. Biology is really neat too.
Cool. I'm going to challenge you a little bit here. And the reason why I'm doing this is because specificity is the enemy of cliche. And in order to prove one's seriousness, it helps to be like, this is what I'm looking for and this is what you've got. They are not going to hold you accountable for, well, you said that you wanted to study volcanoes and now you're here to study glaciers. It would be helpful for you in terms of looking if you were to figure out some subfields that you know that you are interested in. Is there one that you particularly enjoy that you think about a lot? And I'm saying this as a conversation with Justin right now, but I suggest to all of you to think about this with respect to your particular interests. As specific as you can get, you will give yourself a lot of help in the long run. Justin?
I really like ecology and also like physical geography. Yeah, those two primarily.
Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I want to challenge something with you. Is one of the things that could be of interest to you a school that has a really solid program in natural science of the type that you're describing, environmental science, but also would be a place where you could study stuff like map making, things that are about the history of how we've interacted with our natural world, the social science documents that have to do with science.
Wait, can you repeat the question again? It's kind of long.
Yeah, sorry. I get like that sometimes. Is some of your interest in the ways in which social science study like maps coordinates with environmental science?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So one, that is a thing that you could discuss in that Common App. That could be a way of getting at the idea of this is who I am, this is the map to my mind, this is the map to who I am. The place where study of like map making and actual environmental science meet. But also, that's something that you can look at schools. I know that UChicago offers a major that's called, I just completely blanked out. It's the history of science and how science has changed over the years. I think that there are other schools who offer similar majors that are about that idea of a historiographic study of science. That might be worth looking into. Now let's take our feet off the gas for a second. Samantha, Fifi, we talked about a few things last week. Sorry, I sort of are there ways that you can complicate the answers that we talked about from last week that help us get to the place that we were sort of just discussing with Justin, that take the answer that I think is a completely legitimate answer of having feelings about food and getting it specific enough such that it makes sense why it's such a deeply held want. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, but in a way, doesn't that make it sound like I'm criticizing on other schools' food because they don't taste good? Isn't that a bit judgmental
I'm
of me?
so happy you brought this up. I'm so freaking happy you brought this up. No. If
No?
you're careful. This is one of the reasons why I suggest to students to work on getting this specific, because there's nothing that's argumentative if you come up with things that truly are only offered by this school and not another one. There's not an argument to be had if you're like, I really want to go to Northwestern because they offer a journalism program that expects their students throughout their time in school to be doing a lot of internship work as journalists out in the world at the same time. One of their emphases is on practical application of the things we learn in school, not just theoretical. That is true of the Northwestern program. And saying that could be read as a diss of other programs, like they're all theoretical, but you guys are practical. But by speaking purely in the affirmative about this is what you guys have got, it doesn't come off as this is the way that other places are crappy.
Okay, sure. But if we were to talk about food, how can we compare the food? Because clearly I haven't tried all the food in every school. I
don't know what the dietary needs you're talking about are, so I will speak to a hypothetical one of my own.
Sure.
It also, like, the same way that it's not very useful to say, I am going to be an English major. It's more important to specify I have an interest in 18th century coming of age novels. It's like, if it's like, I want to go to a place where the food's good, work harder. It's like, I want to go to a place where I will be able to eat halal because I've spent my entire life following Islamic tradition, and I want to continue to be able to do so and have the food of home. I assume that is not what you are describing for yourself, but
no, not at all.
Right. What is?
I've been to this particular school that shall not be named.
Name it.
I am not. No, but it was just the vegetables it tasted like it came straight from the ocean. It was that salty. And everything else had no flavor. It tasted like rice. And it just, nothing mixed well. And I've been to other schools where you customize what you want. You add you add as much sauce on it as you want. You add whatever to it, and it's wonderful. And in that case, I don't know how to get specific.
So, for speaking about the places where this is true, you can talk about the fact that it's important to you that you're able to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, and that the school actually has a commitment to locally sourced produce. Right? I mean, maybe that sounds crazy, but it is true that there are places that place a emphasis on that, and oftentimes they're the places that care a lot about the earth, that care about global warming and care about thoughtful, environmentally friendly eating practices. It's not that silly.
But if I were, assuming I was an AO, and if I were to read a kid's application and it said one of the reasons why I would love to come to your school is because of the variety of food choices, I would feel a bit offended. Or is that not what the administrators would think?
It would have to be one example among many. It's a partial example. The other thing it could be is an example that's like metonymy or synecdoche, where it's a part standing in for the whole. I could imagine visiting a school that's a very hippie, artistic place that has those liberal arts qualities to it, and one of the things that they emphasize so much is locally sourced food that's good and made locally, and that could actually be one of the ethics of the school. It would just have to be.
Okay.
It's about thinking about who you are and thinking about who the place is and how you fit into that place specifically.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can only speak to my past students and myself with clarity. I don't want to speak for you. But I know that when I was applying to UChicago, I spoke a whole lot more about my dorky, nerdy side and wanting to be at a place where I could have intellectual conversations at parties. And at Oberlin, which is the mecca of liberal arts stuff, I was talking about the fact that I want to be at a place that'll make me a better musician.
I see.
To each place, the appropriate response. To each place, the thing that they would give you.
Okay.
But in order to be able to make those responses, you have to know what you actually want.
Okay.
And none of us, I can't, not your parents, not your guidance counselors or whoever, none of us can really decide that for you.
Okay.
It's for you to decide. We are getting toward the end of our time together today. Does anyone have any questions that they have in anticipation of our meeting next session? Any things that they have that are burning, or should we just talk about what we should prep for next time? Okay. So for next time, here's what I would love to see. If everyone could keep working on that common application essay and get it to a really shiny, good place where they've fully fleshed it out. And then also try and turn in a version that's the greatest hits version. The 350 word version that would be like the version you'd submit for the UCs. That'd be great. The other thing, the only piece of reading for next class is, other than reading each other's work, please go through and read David Sedaris' Santaland Diaries. It's one of my absolute favorites. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who are less fond of My Father and the Wine this week, I think that this will be more to your liking. I want to make sure that that's actually what I put on the syllabus, just so that I send a heads up. Okay, it is. I'm going to make sure it's actually there. Yes, it is. Okay, so yeah, you'll read Santaland Diaries and do the revisions that you need to do. Next class is our last session, so please prepare any questions for me that you happen to have. If you finish more work, have it ready, because my thought is I want you all to have as much workshop time as possible. I also want you all to feel like you're comfortable heading into the summer, developing everything you need to for the rest of this process. With all that being said, are there any final questions of the night, or shall we call it a day for today?
Wait, so we finished the 800 length essay and also like condensed into a different 350 word length?
Yes, the Common App is 650. So if you land at a place that's under word count at 650, that's fantastic. If it's still at 800 and sprawling, that's okay. What I would want for each of you to do is to have that longish version, whether it's under word count or not, and then the one that's the greatest hits version, that's 350, that would work for a UC. And then one of the first projects I imagine that you'd work on, if you have an 800 one, is working on your own after we finish this course, how to cut it down based on the way you cut it down more significantly. Does that make sense?
Wait.
Does anyone have any more questions? Any burning thoughts? Do you feel comfortable moving forward with this process? Because I know we're only meeting one more time, and I want you all to feel really comfortable about what's to come.
I have a question. So I already have a rough outline for some of the supplements, like the UC questions and everything. And I'm planning to do a couple more before next class. Will you have the time to look through all of them, or will you just skim through them and comment on a few?
Here's what I'll say.
How much? Okay.
Perhaps what we'll do is, I don't think you're technically up for workshop next class. Maybe what we can do is, at the end of class, the two of us can talk and walk our way through all of this. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great. All right. If anyone has any questions for me, please send them my way or prepare them for next class. I look forward to reading everything that you've got. Please, this week, submit them to the workshop session 6 folder. That way, they're all in the same place, because I'm teaching like 4 of these classes now at the same time, and I don't have enough time to play traffic cop. But I look forward to seeing what you all have to write. And you've all been doing such a great job. I'm really, really happy with how everything's coming along. And good luck. Happy writing. See you in a few days.
Thank
Good
you.
night. All right. Let's call that a session. Good night. Class dismissed.